Never met.
I don't think. I've hung out in your chat a few times, but that's it.
Have you? I hope you came on a good
I-
day, because we have a couple.
I
Always
think we're live everywhere. Let me double check that. Hey everybody, I am getting used to StreamYard still a little bit. So if we are not live everywhere, we will be shortly, and then we'll get started once I double check to make sure that we are actually live everywhere. So we are currently broadcasting to Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Our Facebook page is Crowdsourced Tribune. It is a not-for-profit that will be housing all our efforts that this cast has helped create. So just give me like a couple of seconds just to make sure we're live and all that. Yeah, okay, live there too. Live on Facebook. Good. And then YouTube. I just don't know how it works. All right, looks like we're live everywhere. All right, cool. All right. So everybody, welcome again to another news roundup. I am your host and moderator, Cypher, and today I am joined by Art Black.
Howdy.
Chase, who's joining us
Hey,
again
everybody.
for the second time. And I am also joined today by Universal Discourse.
Hi.
And I will get your
Fancy.
names up. And this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. For anybody that might be joining us for the first time watching this later on a VOD or peeking in now, Crowdsourced Politics is a podcast born out of a funky little debate community, the Tribune Commons, on Facebook. And we do things like have a news roundup every week at 7 p.m. Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And we also do 2 episodes a month where we cover a variety of topics. So this is the news roundup. So before we get into the week's news, how's everybody's week going so far?
Honestly, I'm having a pretty good week. My sleep is not going great, but otherwise I'm feeling pretty good. I got a good dinner box this week. Got some good recipes. I'm feeling good about that.
Which dinner box do you go with? Is it Blue Apron or Hello Fresh or whatever?
I'm not sponsored by any of them, but I rotate between a few, whichever. So like I sign up for one and then I cancel, and then another one will like send me a coupon to like come back. So now I'm using Every Plate, which is actually my favorite, but Every Plate and Dinnerly are like the 2 most cost effective, and I like them.
Cool. What was in the box?
What's in the hat? What's in the hat, man?
I had like an orange sesame chicken.
That sounds lovely.
Pretty good.
My week is going okay. I had 2 interviews today, which was great. I completely, utterly bombed one of them, mainly because I am not a data engineer, although I try to be. So that one didn't go as well as my other one, but we'll see. Universal Discourse, how about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm having nothing but tech issues and dealing with community drama from Twitch. Good old Twitch.
Isn't that always?
I think the tech issues are far more aggravating, to be honest, which I'm having right now. So,
Art, how about you? What's going on with your week, man?
Yeah, rock and rolling. Busy at work. But we're heading into spring break and nicer summer weather ahead. So everything's just taken off. The local market, the real estate market in Southern California, has completely lost its mind, both in the rentals and the sales. Like it's just it's unmoored from reality. So so there's that.
Oh, well, it's good that business is good though. I take it.
Yes and no. I mean, it's
yes and no.
Right, but it's more yes than no. So we'll go with that.
Okay. Well, so we have a variety of topics that we could talk about today. Is there any particular topic anybody wants to lead with, or do you want me to pull a name out of a hat and we'll get started?
Well, I think Tom Cruise was up for grabs, right?
You want to say
a good place to lead.
It's a crisis. It is confusing millions of TikTok users. Something must be done.
Can you actually play them?
You want me to play them?
Yeah. I can bring it up. I just need a link. What is it? So just YouTube.
Okay.
Well, we'll stall while you find it. So
That's if it just YouTube Tom Cruise TikTok. Like, that's what I'm going to find it as.
Yeah. So Chase,
there's the good one, the magic one is a good one. I will.
There you go.
I'll link it. I'll link it in the.
CNN has it up if you like.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to link it in the private chat.
Mitchell.
All right, cool.
Oh,
Yeah,
Chase. Good to meet you. Sorry.
All right.
I couldn't see anything until now. Okay, go ahead. I couldn't.
That's funny.
You are having tech issues. Okay.
No, I'm visually impaired on top of it, so I'm a joy. I'm delightful to be around when I have problems on my computer. Yeah.
Yeah. So that tweet has, I think, maybe the best one of these if you can play it easily.
Yeah, I can get it up. Just there it is.
So this is. Oh, perfect. Oh, this is so fancy.
Is it already up? All right, cool. I'm still getting used to all this, so tabbing back and forth and stuff is a little. There we go. All right, it's playing now, right?
I'm going to show you some magic. Yeah. It's the real thing. I mean, it's all the real thing.
Yeah. So what's great about this video?
All right, explain this.
How do they do that?
So what's great about this video is that it is not, in fact, the real thing. That is not, in fact, Tom Cruise. This is a deep fake. So this is literally somebody took a video of themselves doing this magic trick, superimposed Tom Cruise over them, and then used a procedural software to put Tom Cruise's voice in there. And maybe I'm describing the process slightly incorrectly, but the gist of it is that is not Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise didn't say those words. Tom Cruise didn't do those actions. But to you and me and to millions and millions and millions of people on TikTok, that was indistinguishable from the real Tom Cruise. And that's kind of scary because we rely very, very, very heavily on audio and video to adjudicate truth in the modern world. And when we are trying to ascertain the truth of a matter, we're often saying, hey, where's the receipts? Got to see those receipts. Otherwise, we are often hesitant to believe things. And when we're living in an era of alternative facts and, divergence of opinion on reality, the idea that deepfakes are going to become more and more common, I think, is problematic. Not problematic, but scary, I think, is the word that I'm going to use.
That is a great point, Chase, that we highly rely on our audio and visual cues. And if those are gone, I don't know what we're going to end up doing. Art, you had a point you wanted to make. Please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that it was interesting, pointing out that Chase did that he was saying that it was real, but it was not real. But another interesting thing about the selection there is that it was a magic trick, which naturally relies on misdirection. So you're literally watching the coin, and you're vaguely aware that you're watching Tom Cruise because it's a Tom Cruise video, but you're also watching a magic trick. So your attention is naturally diverted. And the whole concept of deepfakes is that you don't need to be paying that close of attention. I mean, I'm suspicious, bordering on paranoid, in most things, information related. But even still, if I had watched that not realizing that it was a deepfake, I wouldn't have picked up on it. So as a relatively savvy consumer of information, there's a really sharp cutoff where once you can't trust what you're looking at, and this is just an early deepfake. I mean, people say, "Oh, it's not that good." I don't know. I mean, it looks pretty fucking good to me.
Yeah.
But you have this tier of people who I'm going to just invent this word. I'm going to call them boomers. And these are the people that thought that like violent video games were going to turn us into psychotic killers back in the 90s because the information would hit our brains and we would get brainwashed. But in a very real sense, it's already being shown that even without sophisticated technology, they're able to be kind of, bifurcated and siphoned off into this alternate, set of truths and realities and facts without really even trying. And, once you start introducing technology like this, where they can see Barack Obama embrace Marxism, like you can literally create whatever you want to show. You want to show, Kamala Harris, say that we need to kill all landlords and have a Maoist revolution, like any weird paranoid thing that they want to get out there, someone could just create it. And by the time it's debunked, it's the old saying that the truth is made it around the world before, or the lies made around the world before the truth can get shoes on. So it's not just scary, it's potentially like it's a threat to civilization itself when you have no way to have a grasp of what reality is and what isn't. It's an existential threat in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I when I first was exposed to deep fakes, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years ago, there was little cues that you could pick up on with them. The mouth movement, not exactly in line. Generally speaking, they forgot to do the eye color. So the eye color wouldn't match the actual person. There'd be little ticks with the head movements and stuff like that. So you had to use very like slowly moving kind of people with it. And with that one, I couldn't tell it was a deep fake. I thought that was actually Tom Cruise. And they're just going to get better. It's going to get to the point where you won't need an actor playing the part, and you can just do it all synthetically on the web. And that when that happens, all bets are off, because only one person will, well, maybe a dozen people or so will know that this is a deep fake, and nobody else will. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts about, like, we've already talked about the implications a little bit, but as far as like how this might end up playing out, and whether or not how gatekeepers might go along with this, like, are we going to have to bring back super gatekeepers, or what's up with that?
Just to randomly jump in really quick, the an interesting thing, there's a Hollywood studio exec that was talking about how at some point in the future, they'll have like an Arnold Schwarzenegger of any age and a Marilyn Monroe of any age. They'll put them on screen together. You won't be able to tell the difference. Like you'll just not be able to ascertain. And they have these actors that they have these digital rights to that they can basically create content for. Let's say they wanted to bring back 1983 Luke Skywalker or something and put him in some new series. Were that to happen, it's going to get increasingly realistic and hard to tell. But you're going to have these catalogs, which, as far as gatekeeping, some of your best defense might be just in Disney lawyers who are just not going to let that shit fly. Like if they've got digital rights to somebody, it's a scary thought, but I mean, they could be the vanguard of freedom. So
Disney lawyers are the vanguard of freedom. Art Black 2021. It's
a dark future we're heading into.
That is super scary. Go ahead.
Yeah, in Hollywood, that's when I was in film, that's what we used to do, and we used to CGI, and they could already take you from any age and superimpose it, and they did it with Tron.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which was like it was this whole moment where the actor walks back in and he's young again, just like he was in the first movie. It was this whole huge moment. This gasp goes up, and so when the studio says they own your digital rights, that does include that sort of holographic image that they have of you. That actually does include that. So it's going to change the way actors have to write their contracts.
I first want to acknowledge that Bojack Horseman was way ahead of the game when they had the entire film featuring digital Bojack and not real Bojack. But also, it's weird because you're talking about like gatekeeping. The interesting thing I think about a lot of this software and technology is that it's going to be really, really, really hard to put the cap back on the bottle, so to say, because a lot of this is being done in public with open source technology. Like everyone's going to have access to it. It's kind of like some of the worries we have about the future of 3D printing. Like if everyone has access to a 3D printer, how can you prevent people from producing things that you don't want anyone to produce? And the answer is, I don't know. There's a book that I've literally only heard about, and I don't even know what book it is, but had like the concept, it's like some post-dystopian future book where it had the concept of like fair observers, where like literally they were like basically brainwashed to only be able to speak like what they observed and what was true. And, you could ask them, hey, what color is that house? And they'd say, the house is brown on this side, because that's all that they could see. And I don't know, like maybe that's like, Are we just going to end up in a future where we can't trust any produced media that's out there, and we end up relying on individual accounts of things? Because in a hyper partisan, divided future, I don't know what that looks like. And Disney lawyers, might be able to sue companies from, prevent other companies from using digital imagery, but they aren't going to be able to prevent you and me and the millions of other people who have access to this open source software. So I don't know. I don't know what the long-term outlook is, and I don't even know what we can do about it, but I guess we're going to find out.
So to kind of loop that back in, just two examples to think about, and one was the you remember the famous Orson Welles, reading The War of the Worlds over the radio, and that's how people got the information, and they kind of pretended that it scared people. I mean, at the time, it didn't really. There's just to kind of build up some hype and drama, they pretended that like it caused a panic. But what if you were in this news bubble and they decided to show you something like, and then to skip ahead to my next example, Wag the Dog, where they decided they were going to fake up a war for certain political needs. But what happens when you live in that environment? And in America, where you have competing factions, it might be a little harder to pull that off. But you could have other countries where you have state-controlled media that just decide to show their people something sometime, and you suddenly have this entire nation that is convinced that anything. I mean, that there's a natural disaster, aliens have landed, they're at war. They could be convinced of anything, and if they have no way to, they're just trusting what their eyes and ears say, and then they can't possibly vet it. That alone is terrifying. But even within the U.S., within certain spheres, you could be convinced. You could be shown images of, leading Democratic politicians, kidnapping and killing children and harvesting their adrenochrome and all that. Like, it's crazy the level. Yeah, I mean, it's the level of narrative that could just be created, that people who are within these certain bubbles, just for political reasons, could have not just like a speech, but like an entire storyline that could be created just out of nowhere. Like or just get doubting to the point of like, you could look at what's going on in Texas with the power outages and just say, oh, you know what? Like, they're faking that up. That's just playing it up. It's just, computer graphics or whatever. Like, that's not actually happening right now. You don't need to feel bad about it. It's not a thing. Like, not only can they create, but they get erase. And it's just, It's terrifying to think of what the implications that are.
Do anybody on the panel think that what will end up having to have happen is for gatekeeping live produced content, and that's how people will end up fighting against this?
When you say gatekeeping live produced content, do you just mean like the government is going to enforce who can put out media and not? Like, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, for example, we used to heavily rely on legacy news media in order to share information. Now we have people like us on Twitch and YouTube and that sort of thing, producing content ourselves and talking about things. This is live. Anybody that's watching this knows that what is happening now is, generally speaking, if they trust us, that we are the people who we say we are, and we are sharing the kind of knowledge that we want to, and that we mean what we say. Will we have to end up going back to live content from news media organizations? For example, the New York Times having a live news podcast, where the only time you can know for 100% certain is if it's on their site and it's branded by them. But at the same time, that requires trust and that sort of thing. So do you think that that's what we'll end up seeing happen? Or do you think it's not going to matter and it's going to be bad regardless?
That's an interesting question. I don't really know. I, in general, have been in favor of the democratization of news. And is there a way that people know that we're live? I mean, is there really? There's chats going on and all these things. We could have recorded this hours ago, and how would anyone know unless I'm like actively responding to something that's going on, which isn't really what we're doing. Like, I guess you're right. True. It just comes down to trust, but people are increasingly only trusting things that reinforce their existing ideologies and beliefs. So
that I think is a very, very fair point.
Yeah, I think really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
in journalism, it's the same thing. I remember when I was archiving with Stringers, and we came across several, supposed to have been news segments, and there was a bunch of us, and we were like, that footage is old. It's been CGI'd in. It's been pieced together. What's it actually supposed to be covering up? So we've already seen it showing up in news. So we just archived it, tagged it, tried to take it apart forensically, and we were like, yeah, there were composites.
I think the only thing really that we can do is dramatically increase our efforts to improve media literacy and skepticism, which are both sorely lacking in the United States, especially. Like, people just have no ability to assess whether or not something is credible, realistic, likely, and coming from an appropriate source. We just aren't good at it, and it's really, really, really hard. Like, if you've ever taken an email from your crazy uncle or your dad or your mom or whoever and tried to like unpack all of the nonsense in that email, it takes a giant amount of effort to unpack like a single untruth. And on the face of it, like, if you're media literate, you already know that it's nonsense, but it's going to be really hard for you to unpack that for somebody else. So I think like our only way out is like education and training and media literacy. I think that's the only way we survive in a deep fake future.
I think that's a very good point. I just want to tell our listeners out there that we do have a relevant episode about this. We did cover social trust theory, episode 24. So if you want to check it out, go ahead and hit us up at any of your favorite podcast streaming services, and you'll be able to listen to us pontificate about what social trust is and how we know what we know and how we trust what we trust. Go ahead, Universal Discourse.
Yeah, it's when I sit, and I stream, and I have people that come in, and the things they believe, and they think of themselves as being critical. They totally reject any kind of authority. They'll use research from some cherry-picked paper, and they'll wave it around like a flag, and then they'll say, there is no authority. Don't respect experts, unless it's the one they like. And, we could have done it ourselves or something. I'm like, well, the problem is everything out of your mouth is somebody else's work and somebody else's words. And yet you want to wave theory, for instance, without any regard to where it came from or what it took to actually get that paper into your hands. And it's like an anti-intellectualism disguised as critical thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and it's prevalent, and it's Kool-Aid. That's all it is. And the communities are fostering this type of perspective. It's very much mob rules. It's everything wrong. Everything you don't do as a researcher.
I mean, why? And to even pick up on what you're just saying, like, what do all of the flat Earth people say? Exactly. They don't say, you're an idiot, you're a globist, you're wake up sheeple. They just say research flat Earth. And what do people do? They go to Google, they go to YouTube, and they research flat Earth. And what do they find? A whole bunch of nonsense that if you don't have a critical eye and like understand the scientific method and understand like the underlying things that they're doing, like, you might fall into that rabbit hole. And writ large, that's happening with all kinds of things increasingly, sadly. I mean, the same thing happened with the election. The same thing happened with anti-vax movement nowadays. I mean, it's we're struggling.
The truth doesn't matter. It's what sort of social group or affiliation can you claim?
True.
Okay, because that's what's relevant to people. Never the facts, never the truth. Unless they're harmed. Right? The facts and truth don't matter. Yeah. Police are all bad until you have to call one.
That's a great point. I guess we could go on from this topic. And speaking of anti-vax, we have the vaccine rollout chugging along. We're at an average of 1.8 million vaccines being given daily. Last time I checked. So what do we think that Biden is on a good track to reach his goal of, I believe it was 100 million in 100 days or something of that nature? Do you think that we will reach that? And do you think there will be any pushback from this vaccination regime? Additional pushback than what we've seen?
Schools.
Well, what about schools?
Schools. No one wants them to make the schools safe to open before everybody's been vaccinated, for one, because Biden mentioned there's a way we can do it even before the vaccines get out.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, no, you can't. I think there'd be a lot of pushback, but with so many people left out of work, getting a vaccination isn't going to guarantee you're going to get your job back. And it's also only one shot, or at least one. So how are they going to even afford it? So I think there's going to be a huge bunch of problems. You know, I mean, if they'll fight each other to death over a Cabbage Patch doll, I can just see the lines for getting this shot, what that's going to do.
Yeah.
So, and then when they get out, when they think, oh, it's not safe to go socialize and everything's opened up, they've been stuck in there for a year and a half.
Yeah.
What are they going to be like when they get out?
I mean,
so there's not just pushback. There's going to be chaos, I think. Maybe.
Well, the good news is, so the 100 million in 100 days, I think, was actually not even an optimistic goal. I think it was kind of like a continuation of where we were, and now 2 or 3 times in the past few weeks, the Biden admin has moved it up, and now the most recent statement, which I think was today, they said that they plan to have enough access to vaccines for every American adult by, I think, the end of May.
Okay.
Which is pretty astonishing. Now, to Universal Discourse's point, it is like not optional to get this vaccine rolled out as quickly as possible. Schools being closed is like economically harmful, and it is especially harmful to disadvantaged populations, because think about the people whose kids are in schools. Like if you're somebody who both parents are working, or you're a single parent and your kid can't go to school, that's like really problematic for you. And these people have already been dealing with this for the past year. Like we are in a really bad way, in a way, like I don't even think that people are really talking about or recognizing like how bad things are still in big parts of this country. Like everyone was freaking out about Texas, but like the state of economic despair for a huge number of people in the United States right now as a result of the COVID pandemic is something that we have just stopped talking about, which is really bad. But just focusing on the vaccine rollout, assuming that the Biden administration is right, and I would be shocked if they said that if they weren't right, because the Biden admin has generally been, with regards to COVID, pretty good about under promising and over delivering. That's why they keep moving the target up. So like, I believe that they're going to hit that target. End of May, enough vaccines for every American adult. They need to have a concerted effort to get vaccine information out there, and I really haven't seen it yet. There needs to be tons of resources put into combating vaccine disinformation. We need to have huge public awareness campaigns. We need way more celebrities, politicians, and all of those kinds of people out there publicly getting the shot. Right now, it is not enough. I have a sister-in-law who works as a nurse. She's a family nurse practitioner, I believe, as I'm getting that right. And I have my brother also works in healthcare. But she is she's very frontline. She's talking to people every day. Every single day, she has people coming in and puppeting vaccine misinformation to her. She literally had a 45-minute conversation with somebody about all of the things that a vaccine was going to do to him. It's going to give him cancer. It's going to make him sterile. It's a microchip. All of this thing. And to overcome that is going to take a monumental public awareness campaign. And I don't think that the administration is doing a very good job right now of meeting that need.
I think that's a great point as far as the information campaign. And I think part of the reason why that you haven't seen as much of a push is because we're still wedded to this idea that states can handle a lot of this, and there doesn't need to be much in the way of the federal government pushing this. And I find that to be wrong from my experience with working with living in different states and seeing how how block grants in each different state works. I've lived in Indiana, I've lived in Vermont, I lived in Texas, I've lived in Georgia for a little bit, and all these different states have had different aspects of what they did for block grants. And I think we need more of a universal push. We do have a statement from Destiel, who had said on Twitch, we don't know if vaccines prevent infection. And what they meant was that the vaccines are meant to prevent serious illness rather than prevent infections in general. So what is that correct? I've heard that might be the case, but at the same time, I've heard that it's one of the vaccines is like 70% effective rate. So I'm not entirely sure. If somebody could fill in on that, fill my knowledge gap, that'd be great.
It's supposed to be 70 to 90, and it alters the shape of the crowns on the thing that make up its corona, look like little golf tees. So it alters their shape so they don't fit. And so you'll be infected, but it can't affect you if the vaccine works. If it works.
My understanding, so I'm not a health expert, not an epidemiologist, whatever. Just
same.
But I want to comment first on your comment about the effectiveness. I want to just acknowledge that there is actually misinformation about that as well. So when you say 75 versus 95% effective, a lot of these differences are the result of different methodologies being used to calculate effectiveness. So,
correct.
For example, that 95% effectiveness was used by calculating they basically vaccinated 1,000 people, and some portion of them got COVID, and the portion of them that got COVID was 5% of them were not vaccinated. So they basically said, it's 95% effective at preventing the contraction of COVID. And even that, like that sentence that I just said, may not be 100% correct, because my understanding is that my understanding is that in general, most of these vaccines do actually help mitigate contraction, but they are way, way, way better at preventing serious illness. But here's the thing. If the vaccines are effective at mitigating the symptoms and the spread of COVID within your body, your ability to spread COVID is going to be dramatically reduced, right? Because your viral load and the amount of time that it sits in your body is going to be dramatically reduced. So is it going to prevent contraction? I don't know. I really can't speak to that, but it is going to dramatically decrease the spread for sure.
I think that's a great point, Chase. Thank you for clarifying those points. I think this dovetails well with what we see going on in Texas. I'm from Texas. Well, not from. I live in Texas. Originally from Indiana.
I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. You're better off. Never mind.
Well, what did they say about Midwestern charm? What?
I mean, you live with the Neanderthals, right? In Texas, right?
No,
according to Biden.
According to Biden, I didn't hear that. But
Neanderthal
I don't want to disparage anybody, but I will say that the right wing of Texas is very right wing, so we'll keep it at that. But I guess this dovetails pretty well with Texas. Texas is going 100% maskless. Yeah. So Afra, our one of our commenters and podcast people, had said that somebody had to be first, and yes, I guess someone did have to go first. Texas decided to pull the trigger because it's trigger happy. But what are you guys' thoughts about that, as far as what this might entail with infection rates, death rates? Is this a good idea? Roughly 7% or so of Texas has been vaccinated. Thoughts?
I think that, this is going to be a slightly weird take. The Republican Party in large part, in my opinion, has been operating under the delusion that government mandates and such are the principal thing causing like a lack of economic activity and related. I just don't think that that is necessarily the case. I think that public perception and public safety and public willingness to go out and do things has a way greater effect than any of these public policies. So if Texas thinks that magically all of these businesses are going to operate at 100% and people are going to go out to restaurants and spend their money just because they eliminated this mandate, they're wrong. And in fact, I think the reverse is probably going to be true. I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people who are now going to not want to go out, who are going to stay home even more, and who are going to engage in less economic activity because now they feel less safe. So there's that. And then there's the other reality that, oh, we are just about to subject a whole bunch of people in service jobs, quote unquote, frontline workers, to being exposed, and really they don't have any choice. And that is super awful. So those are my two thoughts.
We got a cute little doggy. No, but as for sure, like, but I think we've also lived in this kind of reality where and somebody's got banging in the background if they can mute themselves. I think yeah, it's art. So one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that the about 30% of people or so do not at all care about the virus, and they want to go out and live their lives. And those people are probably more likely to go out, spend money, go to bars now. But if there's no mask mandate, if there's at 100% capacity, they're probably even more likely to go out and do these kind of things. So it's like somebody said, it's a calculated risk. I don't trust it, but at the same time, I've been living in Texas, obviously, and there's been people on 6th Street every week. I've gone out maybe 2 or 3 times myself or so, just to like pick up food and stuff like that from actual restaurants. And there's people sitting inside, eating, joking, having fun, just living their life. And it's not as many people, but it was still a pretty big amount of people.
Well, yeah, Biden said Texas and Mississippi had Neanderthal thinking. I think it's a bit harsh, but the seriousness of that, with no precautions in place. And I'm like, what are we supposed to think when people do things like that,
And Governor Abbott specifically said people got to take it upon themselves to exercise their best judgment and still mask up when appropriate. But let's be real. Not no one, but the people that we're talking about on this cast right now aren't going to do that. They're only wearing masks because they're being told to, and it's begrudgingly. Like, that's why you see so many of these ridiculous masks, like people walking out with like mesh. Well, I'm wearing a mask. It's mesh. Yeah. But like, I don't know. Art, you've been quiet for a bit. What are your thoughts? What's your take on this?
I love the Representative Cawthorn has those masks he sells that say useless. That's like the greatest cell phone like in merchandising ever. So like all these like passive aggressive mask things, they really crack me up. That's like, okay, we get it. You're irresponsible and you really can't be bothered to do the basics of civilization out of the goodness of your own heart. So, unfortunately, I think for that element, the argument, in favor of, freedom, not just like in the sense that we understand it, but in like the weird, like, almost like anarchic, government is bad, leave the decisions to the people, they'll do the right, responsible thing if you don't get the government in the way. Like, they've actually done more damage to that whole mythos in the last year than they could possibly imagine. Like, when you really get down to it, it's just revealed that this vast swath of the country is, obsessed with not just like, not just freedom in the sense that, it's a right, but the idea that it actually leads to better outcomes. Like, weirdly, they're making a great authoritarian argument by showing that left to their own devices, these allegedly responsible people are morons and they're reckless idiots. And it's I think, shape perceptions beyond what they can really recognize. And especially when they talk on about how like, oh, this is all like a Bill Gates plot where they're trying to steal your freedoms and implant you with chips and like all these like weird rabbit holes they go down. Some are more extreme than others, but the basic sense of it is that like this isn't really something serious. And to the extent that it is, it's a serious threat to your freedom because they want to make it so you can't go to church anymore. They want to make it so that you're dependent on the government. Like it's just this list of paranoia, fever dreams that they're just kind of like venting out. That's making them look insane, but it's also making them look very unserious. Like everyone can be a little, you can have whatever political, kind of quirks you have, but the idea is that we disagree on the best way to do things because we're all interested in good outcomes. But it's kind of revealing them as people that don't really care about good outcomes. They kind of just care about getting their own way. And if the outcome is bad, they don't really care. And that's a weird place to come from.
No, that's a great point. Go ahead, Chase.
Yeah, it just makes me think. This is a weird comparison. When you just said it's making a weird authoritarian argument, it's interesting because China's response to COVID was, in certain provinces at least, to literally force people to stay home under the threat of a gun, right? Like,
they welded doors shut.
Yeah, like you can't go anywhere, you're done, right? And they were very successful in containing things in those provinces. Now, is anybody going to advocate for that in the United States? I mean, obviously not. But what I think is more interesting is that a majority of people in China were totally bought into and supported these efforts. They were on board. They weren't going to violate anything. They were supportive. And now you could say that part of that is because, there's a strong propaganda network in China. China doesn't have outside media sources. Like I've been to China. I've tried to find anything that is contrarian on the news. It doesn't happen. You can't find it. And the majority of people in China are totally bought into the CCP way of thinking. So I want to acknowledge all of that. But I just wonder, what is it going to take in the United States for people to have a understanding of any kind of communal responsibility or any kind of acknowledgement of the negative externalities that their actions have? We're really individualistic. Our law is all based on individualism, but is there something that the government could have done? We have all these systemic issues, right? We don't have access to healthcare, blah, blah, blah. But is there something the government could have done to get more buy-in and make sure that everyone was on board? Or was this inevitable because we're so individualistic? And I don't know the answer. But the contrast is pretty stark.
Honestly, I think if Trump would have said, hey, you got to wear a mask instead of being a petulant child, that would have solved a lot of the issue. And true. It's sad to say, but I'm not going to get into it, but his followers follow him a lot, right? Yeah. And so if he would have said things like that, it would have actually solved probably most of the issue. Trump could have been the greatest president of all time if he just came out and said Black Lives Matter has a point. That's it. He would have lost all his racist, but a lot of the people that would have been that's follow him and stuff, they would have converted a lot of people.
If Trump had supported Medicare for all, he'd be on Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
He'd be a two-term president. They'd be trying to undo the 23rd Amendment, whatever that the two-term limit, 22nd. Yeah. They would be even the left and the right, he would have unified the whole country, but he's just not that guy. So you're right. He could have said, hey, you know what? Tough guys wear masks. Watch this. Oh, I look good in this mask. He could have done that and literally just, and ensured that his reelection would sail through, but he's just not that guy. And he's never going to be. He's just not there. Like Afra says, Trump's not capable of that. He's just not that guy. But if he was, his followers would have followed him, and he'd easily be in his second term right now.
We would be at the end of American history as we know it if that happened. Heads would have exploded.
Yeah, but it's just funny.
That's how you know a bad leader is where when they have that kind of influence and they use it, they're only concerned with, they play to people's fears and ignorance because they have to go They have to dip way low, way much lower than them, you know? And instead of coming up with an agenda that actually helps people, they're only thinking about themselves, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Trump lost money running a casino. I mean, he's going to do shit his way, whether it works or not. And it's just it's amazing how much capital he's blown, you know, literally and figuratively over his lifetime.
Yeah, every company he had went bankrupt.
Yep, for the most part.
Just so he could get out of well, whatever. That's why you bankrupt.
Well,
so you don't pay.
He wanted to screw out his debtors so he could make more money. But yeah.
But yeah, he didn't use the power to go up for the benefit of the people. He used it to mug for the camera and like, look at my dogs, look at all my friends, they're all in the backyard. And basically he went that way because it makes him feel like less of a loser.
Oh, for sure. I think talking about authoritarianism and the mask mandate and other things like this kind of we can talk about another topic that isn't the same, but some people might think it's the same. Everybody knows what cancel culture is at this point. And recently we had Dr. Seuss get canceled. So Afra de la Riviere had said, speaking of unseriousness, how did we get to the point where we are blaming Biden for canceling Dr. Seuss? For those that might not know, Dr. Seuss as a state and the people that handle his publishing, posthumous publishing and republishing had decided to no longer publish several of his books. I think it's 6 that had racist tropes in them. A lot of them were published during the Second World War as anti-German and anti-Japanese propaganda. And there was some other things in that with that. But as far as cancel culture and how Dr. Seuss fits into this, what are your guys' thoughts about this? And is this something that is just a bridge too far, or no, this makes a lot of sense?
Well, that came from the Dr. Seuss, institution or museum from the first place. They did it on their own volition. But bookstores don't believe in censorship. And so they're trying to find ways to get around pulling those books by their titles. So it's a really strange, you mess with a cultural icon like that, you're going to get some bizarre responses.
Mm-hmm.
So that they felt like doing it themselves. I had to take a look at some of it. And the way that they depicted a Chinese man in the straw fieldman's hat and the black shirt and the chopsticks, and the Africans in the zoo.
Yeah.
At the time, it might have been the way the world knew these people. They were put in very traditional clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So that, a farmer in the field would look exactly like that picture. But that doesn't represent all Chinese or all Africans. And so now, with the global media, those depictions really do look really cringe. And I thought all you had to do, why couldn't you just change the illustration? Don't not publish the book. God.
I think they did change the illustration, at least for the he did himself for the Chinese one, and changed it from Chinaman to Chinese man. So I think that actually did happen. But Chase, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, first I want to acknowledge that, we have been living in a post-hummus society since 1986 when hummus was introduced as we know it today. I think you meant posthumous, but I couldn't help but think about being a post-hummus society, which, post-hummusism is important to know. But I don't envy the estate or the museum. I believe it's, the people who are trying to take care of Dr. Seuss's legacy, because they are trying to ensure that Dr. Seuss's core things stick around without modifying what he put out into the world. And I think that it could be maybe more problematic to take a previous work and edit it or change it when somebody is long dead. But they also don't want to tarnish that legacy by having things out there that are, problematic, certainly by modern standards. So like, I don't blame them for doing it. As to your like core question, like, why is this being pinned on Biden? It's being pinned on Biden because unfortunately, like, the Republican Party has just become totally focused on identity politics. And they are constantly fear-mongering, and Republican media and conservative media is constantly fear-mongering about all kinds of social issues, real or perceived. And when you can tap into something like a book that you might love from your childhood and say, look at what the left is doing to your childhood. They are shitting on your childhood. That is a very powerful, emotional, political statement. So does it surprise me that they're doing this? No. Does it make any sense? Absolutely not. Like, I don't even know how it is defensible as like a sensical political statement, but it is the reality in which we find ourselves.
I thought it was very universal. Did you want to go ahead?
I just think that what they should have done, because I'm a publisher and this happens, they should have put alternative imagery and a disclaimer and given a little historical lesson, which would only have enhanced, But yeah, that's exactly it. It's identity politics is just going to inflame people on the right or whatever they are. They're just going to inflame them even more, First it was Mr. Rogers, and now it's Dr. Seuss.
What did Mr. Rogers do? I didn't.
I was going to say, what happened to Mr. Rogers?
Well, when they bring Mr. Rogers back up into film, they bring him back into the public sentiment about how people really feel deeply strongly about that show. They'd be ashamed to admit it, but they loved it. Okay, that's up, and now it's Dr. Seuss. So to them, it's all conflated into the same problem,
I do want to bring up, and I will share my screen for this one, that, hold on a second, that PragerU, yes, PragerU had shared
I'm so preemptively scared.
had shared a Dr. Seuss, and it's one of those situations where it's like, really? So be who you are. Oh, wait a second. I don't think, okay, it's on there. Be who you are. Say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Now, I am fully aware that this is a anti-cancel culture kind of thing, but coming from PragerU, I find it to be disingenuous and pretty funny, given the fact that PragerU minds everything when it comes to culture. So what I think that dovetails well with what Chase was saying and Universal Discourse was saying about the whole right-wing identity politics, and I just thought that was something funny. Art, do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, conservatism is just in its essence a post hoc justification for the status quo. So like anything that we have today that people like, it must be good because people like it. Like it's this like self-reinforcing, like recursive loop where you're like trapped in it. So conservatism doesn't really give you the ability to look back in the past and be critical about it, because the past got us to the present, and obviously we love the present because Dr. Seuss is good, ergo whatever was in the past can't be cringe because we like it now, or we think we like it now, or we liked it as kids, or whatever. Like just time never progresses for them. We're always trapped and never able to reevaluate or progress. Like the idea of progression is against what they stand for. So weirdly, there are complaints about not being able to look at certain elements of Dr. Seuss or anything. Like, unfortunately, we can't look at anything and update our thoughts on it, because updating your thoughts on anything is antithetical to conservatism. Period. Full stop. Like there's unfortunately no way around it. They're just going to be mad regardless of what it is. And this is the same, like you probably remember, or I don't know if you remember, but there was back in the day, even when I was a kid in like the 70s, there would be like cartoons that they took off, like some old like Looney Tunes. There was some questionable Superman content. His feelings against the Japanese during the war were not super progressive. I mean, there's a lot of old cartoon or comic elements that did not age well. And even back then, adults looked at it and go, well, this didn't age well. We're just going to kind of take that out of circulation. And it wasn't really a big deal. Or I should say it probably would have played differently now, because I think people, I don't know, we didn't have this outrage mechanism that was just built to get mad over everything that just gets phased out because it no longer speaks to the current generation, or it says something that we kind of look back on and go, at the time I kind of see where we're going with that. But yeah, Superman's views on the Japanese were maybe not something that we want to carry forward into the present day. So it just, culture and media and all of this changes, it evolves. And, just having the idea of evolution or progress itself be a threat to half the country, weirdly, it's always been like that. We've just not been able to see it the way that we do now. Like, there's always been elements that have fought against change and fought against progress and fought against everything. Like any reevaluation of the past, just, they didn't care. Like, if it was good then, it's good now. And, that's it. Like, you can't argue with that. You just wait for those people to die off. And I hate to say it, but now that we have a society that's capable of kind of propelling change a little faster than people are comfortable with, you're going to get the PragerUs of the world that are going to, just do the French soccer player thing and grab their knee and fall on the ground and beg the ref for a card. Like, that's just where we live now. And we will forever, because we're never going to slow down. We're just going to make conservatives cry forever.
That's a great point. Like, and we have another good point coming to us from Facebook saying, got to fill airtime in that 24-hour, 7 days a week news cycle. So I think that's also a very good point to be making on this fact as well. We have been streaming for just about an hour. I would think we would be remiss if we didn't at least cover Cuomo before we go just free for all. So was that
Perry Cuomo?
Chris
Cuomo.
I'm just teasing your pronunciation. That's all. Yeah, and I made a super old reference that literally nobody's going to get. Even other Gen Xers aren't going to get that one. So never mind.
I don't know who Perry Como is, but I'm sure somebody will let me know. Some Zoomer will come in.
Some sweet music. Yeah, Afro. Go ahead and grow.
Sweet music? Okay, Perry Como. I'll look it up.
From like the 50s. So
I should know, because I know the name is famous, but I'm afraid I've never heard a thing that he ever did. It's embarrassing.
I will have to look that up myself later.
I'm going to be right back.
Just look up Papa Loves Mambo.
Papa Loves Mambo?
Papa Loves Mambo. I know that song.
That sounds awesome. I'll go do that.
It actually is. So I loved all that old shit, though. Sinatra and all the crooners back in the day. Like, I'm such a fucking boomer at heart. It's actually really sad.
This is completely, it sounds completely trivial, but I have an open mic night, and we have an electrical engineer that works in the studios, and he sits. And if you want to hear, and this young man has the exact 30s and 40s, exact 30s and 40s voice, like putting on the Ritz. Like, he actually sounds that way. Mm-hmm. And if you want to come by and listen to him, his name is Kyle, but it'll blow your mind.
Nice. Go check that out.
Exact. You can just cut the screen off and listen to it and go, I don't believe this is coming out of this kid. Anyway, I'll be right back, okay?
No problem. So Andrew Cuomo has been getting flack for a number of different things. And I have constantly seen in different political debate forums that the left and liberals are still defending him, even though he has been credibly accused of sexual assault or sexual harassment, and he tried to kill grandma. That hasn't been my experience, but I'm wanting to hear y'all's thoughts about both of these things, killing grandma and his sexual harassment allegations against him.
I have been blown away by right-wing media continually saying that the left is like rallying behind Cuomo, when I basically I have been unable to find people really like defending Cuomo. And in fact, when I was doing a bit of research on this topic, I found that he basically, like, everyone has been attacking him, and like I saw like sources from like The View and CNN and Katie Couric were all covering how the extent to which he totally botched the nursing home thing. And like from my perspective on the nursing home thing, like if I'm somebody who believes that like Trump's tax return should be out there and it is awful that Florida didn't release COVID data, like it is logically consistent for me to say Cuomo screwed up, he kept data from the public, and that is abhorrent. And I really haven't been able to find sources that say that, but that hasn't stopped the right from saying that the media isn't covering this, even though everybody seems to know about it and the left doesn't care and they aren't holding people accountable. I just don't get it. And the same thing seems to be happening with these accusations. I don't really see anyone defending him. I don't know, like the right-wing media, you know, it's kind of like politics on Twitch and elsewhere. It's like everyone spends half their time complaining about what other people are saying instead of actually talking about the issues. All that right-wing media seems to be doing is complaining about what non-right-wing media is saying without acknowledging that they basically agree in this case. And I don't really know what else to say about it. Like, I think he probably should resign at this point. I don't see a positive path forward for him.
I don't either. I think one of the things that might explain this to a degree, rather than just being outright lies and trying to gin up their base, is that when it came out that that at least for the nursing home instance, when it came out that these decisions were made and they didn't maybe turn out well, there were people on the left, myself included, that defended that decision because it was done to free up hospital beds and prevent patient dumping. Then when it came out that he was accused, that he had somebody had admitted that they had hidden numbers from the public, people reflexively defended against that, thinking that was a lie. So maybe in like the first like couple of hours or so of that story breaking, people online were like, "No, he didn't do that. What are you talking about?" And then they went out and they're like, "Ooh, I don't. Yeah, never mind. That was a bad look." And Afra actually said it best. Everyone dumped Cuomo, and there was a group on Facebook that was a Cuomo fan club, and it's no longer called the Cuomo fan club. It's something else now. So I think that's part of the whole thing there. Universal Discourse, you wanted to break in with a point. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting the way these things go around. I mean, you know, you got to remember when people just say, "Oh, they withheld it from the people." The people weren't up there banging on their door asking for this information. So specifically, Congress and Senate asking for data. It's Cuomo and DeRosa, and they're saying after the Department of Justice requested the information, Department of Justice, they just froze. You know, they said they were afraid of an investigation by the Trump Justice Department. I don't know, they mean the Justice Department under Trump. So that paints a whole different kind of picture, but the gist of it is, I don't care what you were afraid of. You failed to do your civic duty. Period. So I think that's just, I mean, how many more stories like this are going to come up that they were afraid of an investigation under Trump, under his regime, or whatever you want to call it? This isn't going to be the only one. So it's incredibly disturbing that they would be withholding that information, nursing home death data, because they were afraid of an investigation. Like, who was investigating them in the first place? Why was the Department of Justice requesting information in the first place? Were they ordered by the court? What happened there? I think you're just going to see a lot more things like this bubble up now that Trump's out of office. That it was, that's all I can say. I just think it's disgusting. I don't really care what his excuse is. I really don't care. Mm-hmm. If that was my grandmother, you know, I'm sorry. Yeah, horrible.
It's such a sad situation, and especially after admitting to hiding the numbers. Like, come on, man. So we had another good comment coming from our Facebook community. Mike said right-wing media wants him to get the Kavanaugh treatment. So we all know what happened during the Kavanaugh hearings with people banging on the doors saying, not resign, but, withdraw nomination, don't approve of him, prove him to the Supreme Court, since he's being credibly, at the time, largely believed credibly accused of sexual assault. And while Cuomo has not been accused of sexual assault, there's a degrees of separation between sexual assault and sexual harassment, but sexual harassment is not okay either. So there are people on the left that I've seen call for him to resign, but he's not getting this huge sea wave of trying to get him to resign, at least from what I've seen. Now, I don't live in New York. It could be a completely different ball of wax in New York, but I think that's partly why we're also seeing the right-wing media say that as well.
I feel like we have to acknowledge something here, and that is that in general, Democrats do a far, 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 far better job of policing their own. Maybe better or for worse. Democrats police their own, right? When we think about what happened to Al Franken, right, who engaged in behavior far more benign than what Cuomo did. What happened to Al Franken? He was basically immediately driven out of politics altogether. Now, let's compare that to Roy Moore. The entire Republican establishment stood up behind this guy who was affected. I guess I shouldn't mince words. Like, he was a pedophile, like underage people, and openly acknowledged it and like tried to make it sound like it was okay, but no. But like the entire Republican establishment, including the president, stood behind him. Okay. So like, if you want to say like Cuomo deserves the Kavanaugh treatment, honestly, I don't care. Fine. But I just want the Republicans to start holding literally anyone accountable at all, no matter how detestable their actions are. That's what I want to see. Even with Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican Party refused to take action, so the House as a whole had to do it. Where is the self-policing? The Democrats self-police, they eat their own all the time. I don't understand why the Republican Party can't be held to the same standard.
Are you trying to say that the Republican Party aren't good cannibals? That's true. Because that's what we call them.
They're not careless and free. So.
Well, in order to police, like, you'd sort of have to have a sense of shame to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you're not wrong. There doesn't seem to be any sense of shame. It's just all like pure politics. And I don't know how you fix that. Like, I used to be a Republican. Like, I was a Republican for a long time, and I always thought that the Republican Party was the party of morals and values and consistency. And all of that is just gone and dead. And I don't even know if it's possible to get it back. But like, I just don't understand. Like, compare it to Kavanaugh. I'm sorry. I just can't. I can't even entertain it because there's just nothing on the right at all.
Well, there's a lot of this, what you want to call conflation and false equivalency.
Yeah.
And it's every fallacy in a debate is now part of social media. And, you know what I mean? To say, with a coup, trying to say, BLM was a part of it because I saw 2 whole black people there. And that's just as bad, right? I was like, 2 black people who live in DC, which is 98% black people. How do you know they weren't just walking down to the grocery store? What are you talking about? And they'll just conflate and equivocate that so that if like 2 black people showed up, that had to be in BLM. I was like, what makes you think all black people are part of BLM?
Right.
I mean, they live there. Hello. 98% of the population is black. But I didn't see a bunch of black folks in there. I just saw a sea of ivory, and but the right will equivocate that 2 black people there is as bad as, right? Or they set a building on fire in Seattle, and that's just as bad as. And I'm like, God. It sounds like when your 4-year-old child goes, well, she did it too.
Yeah.
She did it too. I'm like, good. I'm gonna whoop both y'all then. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know, fine. See, that's how you deal.
You're actually exactly right, because I remember when the Roy Moore thing was happening, a bunch of Republicans and Republican media were pointing at like some like low-level Democrat in like Minnesota state politics and being like, oh, look at this person. The left is just as bad and they aren't like kicking this person out. And I'm like, nobody has ever heard of this person, and what are you even talking about?
Was that Ellis?
I can't. This is a while ago, my man.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
24-hour news cycle. That was that couple of years ago is like an eternity. So I got you.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I hear all the time. Is that just what Chase said? So, is the question, what do you do about that, or what do you do about that? I always wonder what we can do about that. Sitting here, what is the plan? What's the call to action? Is there one?
Well, sort of. So, Dennis Hastert, Speaker of the House, Republican, got 15 months in prison for paying hush money to sexually abuse young boys.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. So he had just a wall-to-wall, backing of, Republicans, saying what a good guy he was and yada, yada. So meanwhile, we've got Al Franken, who, he fucked around. I mean, it was, one could argue how serious it was, but, took the high road and resigned. Meanwhile, like on the Republican side, what's different is that you have this progression, which is when you have cultures that are collapsing, like with the Republicans, and they feel that they are culturally threatened and falling apart, you undergo radicalization. And there is kind of an interesting thing in Islam, where there's a variant called Salafism, where you basically anything is permitted in the defense of Islam. So while the 9/11 hijackers weren't technically Salafists, they would argue this point with you if they were still alive. But they were functionally, in that kind of vein where they would go to strip clubs to blend in. They would drink alcohol. They would do all kinds of terrible things because the ultimate goal wasn't to create that world; it was to destroy it. So you basically have this sense among this, vein of Islam that's looking, in the Arab world, that's looking at the future and saying, you know what, like our glorious past doesn't exist in the future that we're in right now, and we need to stop acting like anything is on the table. Everything has to be on the table. Like we need to do whatever's necessary to survive, because if we hold back in any way, we are going to be destroyed by this encroaching future. This modernization is going to wipe us out. The Republicans are basically in that same vein now. They're lapsing into this sense that the future is closing in on them. They're not going to have a part in it unless they get more and more open to the idea that everything is permissible in the defense of, that which they will not speak, which is white nationalism. So we have the very, very, good parallels we can look at with the kind of radicalization in certain elements of Sunni Islam and the Republican Party. You have a lot of people who don't necessarily support the violence, but they kind of understand it. And it's a question that really has no direct answer other than you kind of have to just sit back and let modernization take its toll. And, the future is going to happen. And you have regressive elements that are going to fight it to the death, and then they're going to die. And there's just nothing is going to change that. Like you have to get old and pass from the world. Or for some of these guys, they just want to die on the battlefield, and they may get that opportunity. But
they die on that hill.
Yeah, they have hills, metaphorically, literally, or what have you, that they may be willing to die on. This is kind of a dark kind of conversation to have with a chihuahua in my arm, but
it's happened before, I'm sure.
I'm sure, right?
Sorry.
But that's the long and short of it. Is that you have these cultures that sense that they're dying, and they get more radical. So they don't want to be what the future is laying out for them, and they're willing to really violate all of their own beliefs if that's what it takes to survive. And it's almost inspiring, I guess, but it just in a really dark and terrible way. So it's nothing more than just radicalization. It's just people that just would rather burn the world down than let it get better or let it change.
Well, I think that dovetails well with the topic we should finish on, which is CPAC. Speaking of radicalization, we have the.
You had to do the rune thing, didn't you?
I did.
Yes.
I did. Now we're all gonna get canceled. I'm sorry, every single one of us. No, I'll take it off screen now.
I have plumbing to install. I can't be canceled.
So we had CPAC that happened last week, and it was very interesting. Not only was there a possible odal rune, but there also was the golden calf of Trump. I'll get that on the screen too, in case people haven't seen it, but I'm sure people have. But yeah, let me go ahead and get that on the screen as well. But what does this mean for the Republican Party now? And has Trump basically completely cemented his hold on the Republican Party, or do we still think, or do people think that it will eventually diminish? I have too many tabs open.
Okay. I want to acknowledge something first that I like to acknowledge as often as I can, and that's that so many people on the left and so many Democrats operate under these delusional ways of thinking that, like, oh, Trump's going to start Trump's going to have the 25th Amendment invoked on him. Trump's going to be removed from office by conviction in the Senate. Trump is going to start a new political party, which is going to mean the Republicans lose forever. These like weird delusional things, I can't believe that anybody ever thought they were going to happen. And like the discourse going into CPAC of Trump screwing over the Republican Party is so nonsensical. Like I never understood it. So I want to acknowledge that. Now, does Trump have a stranglehold on the Republican Party? I don't really know. It's interesting, there's that straw poll that people want Trump to be the 2024 candidate. I would be really surprised if he made it that far. He definitely enjoys having the power, and he definitely is going to continue to grift and make money off of his Republican identity. Like, I just don't think that those two things are going to change. One thing is for sure, whether or not Trump is the 2024 candidate and whether or not he maintains his stranglehold, I don't think we are going to see any recovery from Trumpism and this new brand of reactionary cancel culture, id poll Republican Party. I just don't see us moving away from that, regardless of what happens. We seem to see over and over again that Republicans that are not bought into that new modern reality are getting primaried, are getting shoved under the bus, are getting forced out of the party. I'm thinking of people like Justin Amash, but even some going back a couple of years, guys like Paul Ryan and John Kasich, like these people are no longer welcome in the Republican Party. I mean, even Mitt Romney and John McCain are basically seen as pariahs by most of the Republican Party at this point, like most of their actual voters, which is just insanity. So I don't know if Trump himself is going to have the same stranglehold that he used to have, but Trumpism certainly will.
If Trump has a hold, the only way he's had it is through blackmail and extortion. If he exited, and as the fool that he is, controls the Republican Party, granted he's stacked the deck, that if he controls people, he's doing what you call convention politics, and what he's got blackmail on many of them. I wouldn't be surprised, because he's got some way to influence them. I mean, wait for it is all I'm saying. You'll see it. It'll start.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised given the catch and kill of his stories with that involved himself. So the other side of that is getting dirt on other people. But I don't necessarily know if that's the reason why this is happening. I think it is more voter driven. And I think it's the kind of reactionary thing that we see with younger Republicans. We have, or people that aren't Republicans, but Trumpians or whatever.
Trumpets.
Like trumpets,
Trump
like
what they're called.
like Nick Fuentes, and how he got regular run-of-the-mill Republicans to speak at his convention, the American Verse Convention, and the like. Art, I'd like to get your opinions on this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for a GOP primary, I mean, even if Trump is at under 50%, if he's over 30%, he could easily win the nomination in 2024. Like, he could lose a huge amount of support. But as we saw last time, you're going to have, several people running. And now you're going to have the effect of not just having the votes, and the support split in different directions with him having the plurality, but you have absolute legions of people who are fully weaponized and will absolutely turn on anybody. So you could have, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and it doesn't matter how Trumpy you are. I mean, you could be Devin Nunes. I mean, any of these guys, if any of them run against Trump and Trump doesn't want them to, his people will absolutely destroy them. And not only will his people destroy them, but anyone that Trump has ever gotten close to has suffered for it. They've all paid the price. Anybody. I mean, his own lawyers in jail. Like, I guess is he technically out right now? Like, I forget what the deal is, but I mean, it's a siren song to just go to Trump and think that you can leverage his fame and money and fortune or whatever, because he will take people in as favorites for a while and they'll be like toys to him. But when he gets tired of his toys, he breaks them. And everyone who's ever gotten close to Trump, who's not directly related by blood, and I'm not even his family, like his, he goes through wives, like people change underwear. Like, he is not to be trusted unless you are a literal blood relation of his. So why these people think that they have the ability to, use him to build a platform on, at some point, either he will see you as, someone whose star is shining too bright, like Steve Bannon. He just got rid of Bannon because people were saying good things about Bannon, and or you'll be a problem for him, and he'll decide that he wants to knock you out of the way, or he'll just get bored of you. Like, he's just he's not wired for any kind of loyalty or coalition building or anything like that. So you really just kind of have a one man's narcissism that's kind of directing a major national party, and until they get tired of losing, they're stuck with him. He's too much. Oh yeah, that's right. Cohen's confined to his house, so he's like house arrest. But still, like, you basically went from being a hitter for Trump to having his his confidence and loyalty in business to just he can't I can't show his face now. Like, some deranged Trump supporter could take him out. So it's it just shows that the party is basically captured. But this sort of hostile takeover doesn't really stick. Once you lose the ability to inflict, fear and control over people. He still has it now. It's kind of winding down. But until the party itself, like the voters, get tired of losing, which they will get tired of losing because too much is on the line. Like, they're kind of have this dalliance with Trump right now because they enjoy sticking it to the elites and to whoever. But just. Trump doesn't even have Twitter anymore. Like, he's lost a lot of his value to the movement, and especially with the midterms, it really doesn't matter how the midterms go because Trump has no policy. There's no future. There's nothing. It's just one man's just ego trip, and that's not enough to run a party on, and that's not enough to stop the evil march of progressivism. So they're going to get bored of him at some point. It's just a question of how long. Like, he can't make a comeback. He's not that guy. He's not coming back. But he doesn't want to leave either because he loves having his ego stroked. So they're just stuck stroking this like maniac's ego until they get bored of getting their asses kicked by the Democrats.
Well, I mean, during the whole CPAC speech, it was tying Trumpism to everything that conservatives have been complaining about Republicans not doing enough of for a better part of a decade, right? So I'm not sure with the current voter base, if that's so much going to be a thing where you'll see them die off. But yeah, I think once, maybe you lose an election or two, I'm talking presidential here, then maybe you'll see them wise up. But I don't know. Like I said, the younger cohort of Republicans are, like Cawthorn and Cotton and Holly. These are the younger cohort of Republicans that are little bit more authoritarian than people want to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Like, these are the people who I keep thinking of as the most likely 2024 people. Like Donald Trump actually, to Art's point, has been really deplatformed in a way. And I know it doesn't feel like it because he just gave this speech and there was a lot of media attention to it. But I remember in 2016, every single time, and even since then, every single time Trump had a rally, it was broadcast live on most every major cable news network. This time, I'm pretty sure only one network did it, and it was Fox. So in addition to Trump not having his megaphone on like social media and everything else, his platform has just been severely diminished. I think that your guys' statements about the Republicans like continually losing is not acknowledging what the Republican Party is doing right now to ensure that doesn't happen. And that is quadrupling down on voter suppression, gerrymandering, and not bolstering their systemic advantages, which are already insanely strong. True. I don't really know if the Democrats have the desire, chutzpah, to effectively combat what is coming at them from the Republican side. The Democrats just haven't had the backbone consistently to push back against these kind of attacks on voter rights and the right to vote. And I'm really scared about 2022 and 2024 because I really think that the Democrats are not going to accomplish as much as their agenda as they want, and they're going to look bad because they don't have any salespeople, and their systemic disadvantage is going to be even worse by the time we get to 22 and 24.
I think that's a good point. One of the people in our community brought up earlier that it's possible that some of these federal-based challenges or federally-based laws that the Republicans are trying to push for will actually get turned down by the justices that they just recently appointed on 10th Amendment grounds. But from my experience with Democratic politics, it doesn't seem that there is enough of a focus on state court battles from the national party. I think this whole like we'll let individual parties do kind of their own thing is partly then the federalization of party politics is a good way to say that, diminishes their ability to fight these things. And I'm concerned about that as well.
Yeah, I hate to say it. I feel the same way Chase says he feels. I mean, it's very doomer.
It is. I'm sorry.
And it is. And I'm like, it's kind of like a football game commentary. It's only making it, I mean, it just makes it worse because I'm hoping that Biden, who was second to Obama, saw the GOP get up to some of its worst antics. So I'm hoping that he knows how to play ball like that and can direct his staff to squash that. But there's so much they could have done to stop all this, like bipartisanship, you know. So it's just catching everyone else up in this ridiculous football game where, you know, there's scrambling and pass interference and blah, 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 and a foul call, and it's all gamified almost. And it's like the rest of the countries get caught in this horrible performance.
And the Republicans don't have any incentive right now to actually compromise. They get rewarded when the government's at a grinding halt, while Democrats get skewered. And then Desmi on YouTube mentioned who is surprised that Democrats are backing away from their campaign agenda right now. I'm not surprised. At the same time, I don't what Democratic agenda. I think it's kind of a fracture to a degree, right?
They barely ran on policy.
Yeah, the fifth, like Biden has things that he wants to accomplish, but he wants to accomplish all these things without breaking any leftover norms that we still have.
Yeah.
And so that makes it impossible to do things like getting the $15 minimum wage. Personally, what I think should happen is that the House should act like the House did under Republicans and pass every month a bill to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and send it to the Senate. I think that's what should happen, like the Republicans did with repealing the ACA. At the time, I thought that it was a waste of time, but we're not going to get much done anyways. So may as well make it look good that they're fighting for something, and it's Republicans and some Democratic senators that are keeping it from passing.
I just want to acknowledge that, like, Joe Biden is the king of this, like, loser attitude, basically. Like, the few things that he, like, basically got elected to do, he's already backed down on. $2,000 checks, back down on. Limited the number of people who are going to get it. $15 minimum wage, back down on. Like, these are popular policies, to the point that $15 minimum wage passed in Florida, a red state, by like 12 or some odd percent, like by a significant percent.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to point out that if the Republicans were in this exact same position, I have absolutely no doubt they would be playing way more hardball. And you look like all the way back to 2001 when there was a 50-50 Senate and the parliamentarian ruled against them. What did the Republicans do? Fired the parliamentarian. And I just, I said it before, the Democrats continue to not have a backbone. It makes me angry, and it's going to cost them votes in 2022.
Yeah, Joe Biden's an old school windsock politician. I mean, he's not an ideologue. He's a guy who has been in Washington forever because he just goes with the current, and he's good at it. I mean, it's it's not as easy as it sounds. A lot of people can't figure it out. So, I think that he is, in his own way, in his own expertise. You read the mood of the country, and right now the country's exhausted. Like, it's tired of COVID, it's tired of Trump, it's tired of the emotional barrage of the last 4 years. And his play is to do as little as possible, have as little conflict as possible, and let the country just kind of regenerate and just kind of come back and bank on this idea that after a year or so of normalcy, when the vaccines are out, the economy restarts, and everything just kind of gets back to a sense of moving forward without chaos and drama, that'll be enough. And that could be a wrong read, it could be a right read, but it seems like right now he's banking on the idea that the country doesn't want more fights. It wants whatever will move things forward without causing more stress or tension. I don't necessarily know that that's true, but I also didn't spend 40 years in DC. So, you gotta, well, you don't have to love Joe Biden's policies, and Lord knows I don't. I do respect his chameleon-like nature to adapt and evolve and be what the people want him to be. So that's one thing. As far as the Republicans, they have their own challenges going forward, but they're internally crippled by incompetence. And I think I mentioned this story to you guys, in text, but I'm just going to tell it really quick. Back when we were in Iraq back in the day, before convoys, we'd have the chaplain come out, say a couple of words, and just kind of bless us for the road ahead, sort of a thing. And for the guys who were into that, it was important. So one time the chaplain was double booked. We had a convoy. We needed to leave. And so the team leader just kind of looks around and goes, Art, you talk pretty. Say something nice. So I'm like, invocation? So I thought about it. I'm like, may we be blessed with incompetent enemies. And this is like awkward silence where they were expecting me to say more. And then they thought about it and like, oh, that's actually the only thing that we ever really wanted. Because, back then, we're a bunch of idiots. We're just, constantly afraid that you're going to do something wrong and get yourself or everybody else killed, kind of a thing. But you think about that and it kind of cuts both ways. Like, you are always saddled with your own, fears or, the limits of your own expertise and skill. But that's 100% true of the other team too. So it's really impossible to get past a certain level of stupidity and incompetence. It will wipe you out if it gets you. And you worry about it getting you, but what you really want is for it to get the other side, because Murphy's Law works both ways. So Republicans are suffering with that too. They are saddled with the kind of incompetence that you can't buy from the other team. Like, you want to have the strongest team possible, but the next best thing is for them to have the weakest team possible. And right now, because of the awful effects of the Trumpism kind of dragging the party down, but also the old school, like, Rockefeller Republican country club wing, the Romneys, the Mitch McConnells, those guys are losing power too. So you kind of have this evolution and collapse that's not really being replaced by anything competent. It's just this weird sort of meltdown that is just I mean, they're certainly going to get vicious and they're going to try really hard to do terrible things and restrict voting and all that. But they're also really bad at this. Like they got blown out. Like what they're just being vicious alone without, when it's not paired with competence, it's terrible. Like it doesn't lead to victory. So all we can do is pray that we continue to be blessed with incompetent enemies.
Well,
yeah. If they are incompetent, you better hope nobody competent emerges. And that's who you're supposed to be looking for.
True.
That's who you're supposed to be looking for. There's somebody right now watching the whole thing and going like this. Good. Waiting.
There's always a number 3 or number 4 you hope doesn't get promoted.
Well, biblically, they used to say it wasn't the beast you had to worry about. It was the guy behind the beast.
Oh, yeah.
I wish that I had your belief in the incompetence of the Republican Party and the right.
Yeah.
But when I look at the last 20 years, how they have strategically done things like Project Red Map, how they have the Federalist Society, how they have all of this infrastructure in place to take high school students and college students and make sure that they are being bought into right-wing and Republican ideology. I don't see similar efforts on the Democratic side or on the left. I mean, it's starting to happen, but I think back to all the way to 2008 when Obama had this massive network of grassroots campaign organizers. And what did he do with that massive network after the election was over and he'd won? Basically, it dissolved. They didn't leverage it to build towards the future. It just kind of got rolled up into the DNC, and now we're trying to we're trying to combat and do what the Republicans did, but we're like a decade or two behind. I say we. I don't really consider myself a Democrat, but you know what I mean.
No, we understand that you mean the broad left in general. We have the Gravel Institute, but that's also just piggybacking off of the success of PragerU. Everybody wants to say, "Oh, Soros," but whatever. What are you going to say, Art?
It's Gravel. I know it sounds.
Is it Gravel?
Like it's not like trying to be hoity-toity or whatever, but like it's
You know, I can't win today. I'm just going to stop trying to pronounce things. It's your guys' show.
Yeah, I was gonna say it can be Gravel in our post-hummus society.
Exactly. Yeah. True.
Post-hummus. Yeah, I'll get it eventually. But Gravel.
Yeah.
Gravel. Okay. So yeah.
I mean, it's just like with that app, Parler.
Oh yeah.
They wanted it to be parlay when they made it. It's a French word. And then you get a bunch of rednecks on there, and then it's like, we're gonna get on some of that Parler, yeah.
Oh, Parler is too liberal for me. I only go on Gab.
Hell yeah,
God.
That's right, brother.
No one clipped that. That will be serious bad. But
we just canceled ourselves. I'm sorry.
We did. Is there any other final points y'all like to make? Shout outs again for the audience. That sort of
Too many points to make on that situation for me. It's I will say, being a veteran, Sun Tzu, never underestimate your enemy.
True.
That is your first and last mistake.
True.
Or overestimate yourself as your second.
Yeah.
I guess my only final thought is that conversations like this and the fact that we're broadcasting live and the fact that there are people watching and that there are people interested gives me some hope for the future. And I appreciate all of you for being a part of that.
Yeah.
Likewise. We've had 16 or 17 or so people come in and out as the night went on. We usually get more people to watch us after on VOD. So yeah. I would also piggyback off of Chase, and we do this. Crowdsourced Politics does this for you all. So with that said, go ahead and be sure to join. If you do Facebook, join our Facebook community. It's Tribune Commons. We run a political debate community that's trying to be more community than debate. So we're doing things like this podcast. So a lot of the questions and topics that you heard tonight came from this community. If you're not a Facebook user, hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on Twitch. We want to know, we want feedback. You can even email us at crowdsourcepolitics@gmail.com and share your thoughts with us, and hopefully you can get on the air. And so with that, everybody, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end. So go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms and the like. Universal Discourse, Chase, again, thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead and do a shout out to yourselves really quick so people know what your content is about and so they can follow up.
I have a meeting in 10 minutes, which I'll promote, but Universal Discourse is literally universal discourse. It literally means the art of discourse. It's all things indigenous and quantum, believe it or not. I'm in human rights practice currently, and I'm also a director of training and research for a counter-extremism organization. And in 10 minutes, we're going to feature someone who was working directly with the Rohingya. If anybody's interested in finding out what happened to the Rohingya, Professor Tawfiq Haq, North South University in Bangladesh. You can meet me on stream at twitch.tv/Universal Discourse and see if we can tune in, and you'll be able to find out what's really going on in the rest of the world. And that's pretty much my stream, except for open mic night and D&D, and that's fabulous. Okay.
Nice.
Great stuff. Chase?
So I'm Chase. Chase W. Mitchell is how you can find me on Twitter and on Twitch. I am a part-time Twitch streamer and a full-time podcast enthusiast. And in my free time, I actually work in international development in Washington, D.C. So I like to talk about international relations a little bit. I like to talk about politics a lot, but I really, really just enjoy having conversations with other people, and that's what I try to make sure I'm doing as much as I humanly can on my Twitch stream. So yeah, come by, hang out, and thank you for having me again. It's a lot of fun. Oh, and I volunteer for a bunch of Model UN conferences. That's why I'm wearing this Midwest Model United Nations fancy sweater, because I volunteer for Model UN organizations. And if you're in college, if you're out there and you're in college and your university has a Model UN team, I strongly, strongly encourage you to check it out and join. Model UN gave me an international perspective that I never had, and actually really changed my understanding of the world, because it forces you to adopt a viewpoint that you might not be accustomed to. So, hey, if you're in college, go join Model UN. That's my advice for the day.
All right. Thank you again, Chase and Universal Discourse, for joining us. You're more than welcome to join us on our news roundups or when we have a recorded podcast episode. So we'll definitely be in touch. And as always, everybody, keep your head up through the political storm.